Manzo. I am a self-taught guitarist and musician from Colorado Springs, Colorado, which is where I am right now actually. I'm at home. I started learning how to play the guitar probably nearly 4 years ago now, and ever since then I've been in love with playing and also with creating new music all the time. It's something that I simply can't stop myself from doing. Over the few years that I've been playing and creating music, I've made public a few standalone songs on both YouTube and on Bandcamp. And then recently, for the first time, I released a 9-track album on both Bandcamp and on YouTube. And I thoroughly enjoyed the process that went into creating all those songs and creating the album ultimately. And so that's what my series on Arts Inc. is intended to be about. My intention is to using my songs as a pool to draw from and using them as examples is to demonstrate my process of starting out with just a chord progression or a little lick or riff and ultimately ending up with a full and finished song. And by full and finished, I mean full and finished both in the acoustic compositional sense, in that I can play the entire song at once acoustically, and also in the sense that it's been recorded via recording hardware like a microphone and an audio interface, and also via audio software like Ableton or FL Studio or even Audacity, which I used a lot when I started out. And so more specifically, I'm going to be starting with a song of mine called Colored Balloon, which is one of the first songs on my recent album. And as you saw in the little intro there, I showed the initial chord progression that I stumbled upon. And then I contrasted that with a little snippet of the completed song. And so what I'm going to do is go over everything that came between those 2 points, everything that came between that original chord progression and the song as it ultimately ended up. And that's my process right there in the middle, and that's what I'm hoping to illuminate here with this series. And I just want to say that it's only my process, and everyone has a completely different process, so there's no right way to do things, there's no wrong way to do things. People do things differently. But hopefully a view into my process can help someone out there in some way in terms of their musical creation. Alright, so in talking about that initial chord progression that I showed at the very beginning of the video, that one, I came across that by stumbling across it, which is what happens for me very often. Rarely is it intentional. I was actually playing this chord here, which is a nice chord. I like how it sounds. And at one point, instead of playing that, I accidentally had on my fingers a string too low, and I played this chord, which doesn't sound all that great. I mean, it's alright. Not really something I'd want to use though. But I thought to myself, what if I take that shape and I move it up to the 5th and 7th frets? And so I did that, and what I got there was this chord. And immediately upon playing that, I liked the atmosphere that it created and just how it sounded. It sounded like a very dreamlike chord. Kind of felt like looking up at the sky. And so at that point I knew that I had a nice chord upon which I could build the rest of a song. And so what I tried to do after discovering that chord was find other chords that would go along with it in a progression. So for instance, I would try things like or any number of various chords. But again, I stumbled upon something that sounded nice to me, and that was having my pointer finger down and kind of barring the last 3 strings here. I liked that sound. And so I thought I would bar the entire 5th fret and keep my pinky and ring fingers where they were. And so that's where the 2 chords came from. And then as far as the strumming pattern, I can't say exactly where that came from, but it fits into a nice and simple 2-chord progression in 4/4 time signature and everything. It's pretty standard. That's the kind of that's the strumming pattern that I came up with, those 2 chords. So after I had those 2 chords and I had that strumming pattern, I had the basis for the verse section of a song, or a chorus or a bridge. But I felt at this point that those 2 chords would be the fundamental pieces of a verse part for this song. And so that was all I had at one point. I just had those 2 chords and I had a strumming pattern. And at that point, like I do often, when creating a song, I try to come up with some kind of vocal melody that would go along with it. Not with any words in mind, but just a melody that would fit over top those chords. So for instance, I started out with something like this. Da da da, da 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 da. Da da da, da 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 da. Da da da, da 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 da. So yeah, that's what I came up with in terms of a vocal melody. It didn't have any words. It was more of just a humming pattern, or something I could sing on top of the chords. And that's what I do most of the times. I just start singing a vocal melody on top of whatever chord progression I've come up with. And sometimes I'll just throw in random words to make hitting certain notes easier and whatnot, but it doesn't mean anything. But obviously there's no words there, it's just a vocal melody, and so that's what I came up with to lay on top of the initial chord progression that I had come up with. So at that point I knew what I had for a verse with respect to the main guitar part and the vocal melody. So for whatever reason, after that I knew I wanted to have a bridge part, and I wanted to have a kind of jazzy chorus, and I wanted it to be mellow in the chorus, quite mellow and kind of have a soothing atmosphere. That's kind of what I felt was the direction of this song. So in order to create that bridge and then into a kind of mellow chorus, I went to one of the chords that I know is a good kind of jazz chord right there, kind of a variant of A. And then another chord that I know fairly well, right here. It's like a D, but the other way, right? So I took that same kind of strumming pattern I had up here, and I took it down here and I split it between these 2 chords, and I came up with. Alright, so I was at that point, I knew I had the verse, and I had a nice bridge part that kind of had quite a bit of energy in it. And I thought it'd be really cool to have that kind of energetic bridge lead into a mellow chorus. And I'm not quite sure how I came across this chord progression for the chorus, but it ended up being like this. And that right there is what I like to do that with a lot of my songs, is just have the chorus nicely transition right back into the verse part, as you heard there. And in this case, it's a little bit of an abrupt change, but because the actual strumming pattern is fairly similar, it just blends right back into the verse part. So at that point, what I had, I'll play it all instrumentally, was this has the verse. And leading to the bridge. And the chorus. And so that's what I had instrumentally at that point. And once I got to that point, I knew that this was going to be a song for sure. And then, so for this bridge part, I felt like the vocals should be something kind of repetitious. And so I came up with something like this. And then all I needed was the vocal melody for the chorus. And so just trying out random notes and singing over it with random words, with random melodies. And what I ultimately came up with for the chorus was something like this. Yeah, so again, it's a bunch of gibberish what I'm singing there. It's just sounds. But if you listen to the complete song, you can see how that melody matches on with the words that I ultimately came up with. So that's going to do it for this first video. I showed how I came up with the original chord progressions for the verse, the bridge, and the chorus, and also how I stumbled upon the vocal melodies that I layered on top of those chord progressions. Going from that, next time I'll go over how I came across the lyrics that ultimately I tracked onto that vocal melody for the verse, bridge, chorus, and I'll also go over how I came to finalize the acoustic composition, and I'll also play the acoustic composition in its entirety. And eventually after that, I'll go over how I recorded the song using hardware, software, and some of the techniques I used for recording. So I'll see you next time.